It's actually a pleasure to be talking about innovation again because I haven't spoken about it for a very long time. It's my background, but I haven't really been involved with it for about certainly 5, might even be 10 years now. Where's my clicker gone? There we go. I've got 10 rules for you. There's actually 11, but we'll come to that at the end. And I want to start with an Irishman, and I'm going to end with a Welshman. And I want to start with George Bernard Shaw. The reasonable man adapts himself to the conditions that surround him. The unreasonable man adapts surrounding to himself. All progress depends upon the unreasonable man. And I would like to add women there as well. It's a bit silly to remove the brains of half the planet there, but okay. I have a background in innovation, about 20 years worth. I started writing for Fast Company in America on innovation, which got me into the whole sort of writing game. These days I tend to write about the future, and I'm into scenario planning, but my sort of heart's very much with innovation. Now, just a little bit of background as to why it's actually quite a good time to be talking about this. If necessity is the mother of invention, I would imagine that paternity testing would prove the father to be adversity. So it's a good time. In fact, in my experience, too much money and too much time is the enemy of innovation. And I think Britain has a sort of rather wonderful history of people in the back of garages, or in the British context, it's probably more sheds, changing the world with very little help and very little money. There is a tremendous amount of money out there for new ideas. Do not believe anyone that tells you the opposite. And if British banks aren't lending, screw them. Go somewhere else. Go to America. Go to China. Go to Singapore. There is money there, trust me. It's never, ever been easier to set up a business. The barriers of entry have fallen to pieces. They're just almost not there anymore. You don't need a factory. You can rent that. You can rent anything these days. And it's probably cheaper than ever. I mean, we've got practically zero interest rates. And the market for what most people do is relatively global. I mean, that's truer with truer with products than services, but even with services, I mean, I'm really in the services business more than anything else. The market is undoubtedly global. And I think the other thing is, you can't complain to your boss if you're the boss about what happens. You know, so if you want to sort of grab the future by the scruff of the neck and sort it out, then you really need to be in charge. Now, the first rule: don't confuse creativity with innovation. They are fantastically different things. And people misunderstand this all the time. I mean, this has been touched on already, but creativity really is about ideas. And they are, frankly, to a penny. I mean, there's an awful lot of them out there. Very few good ones, but there are a lot of ideas. Innovation is really about the commercial application of that idea, the successful commercial application of that idea. And a lot of businesses don't get that. And the other thing that's even more fatal is they try and do both at once. And in my experience, small companies are fantastic at ideas. They're not very good generally at scaling them, at protecting them, and so on. In contrast, very large organizations are bloody awful at ideas, but they're fantastic at taking something quite small and making it big. And actually, there should be more marriages between, you know, SMEs and very large businesses in that context. And I think one of the tricks is to recognize you can't run the world. It's very, very unlikely that you're going to be good at absolutely everything. So find out what you're good at and outsource all the rest of it. Allocate your time in the right way. You know, you can't add on innovation. It's sort of got to be fundamental to the entire business. But that doesn't mean you're running around doing the crazy stuff the whole time. I think something like 70% of your time should be focused on making what you currently do better. It's around incremental innovation. You might, and that's, you know, the stuff that's going to be out there in the next of 18, 24, 36 months. You might want to spend about 20% of your time and money worrying about 5 years out. And that's building on that incremental stuff. But I would always have 10% of time and money for the really wild and crazy stuff. 10 plus years out, stuff with a 90% failure rate, probably. Stuff that's just really unlikely to work, but if it did work, could potentially change the world. And usually you've just got to embed it. You've got to do it the whole damn time. It's not a department. It's an attitude. It's a culture. The second rule really is that, you know, you've got to wanna, as the Americans would probably say. There's a great quote from Steve Jobs, he was trying to get John Scully, who was the chief executive officer of Pepsi, to come and join Apple. And he said, do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life, or do you want to change the world? And I think that's the sort of spirit that we've got to capture. Now, that's not for everybody, and I don't think people should be forced to behave like that. It does help if you're trying to overcome the impossible, and I think looking for really big problems is a way to get really big ideas. There's a lovely quote, by the way, from Henry Moore, which I used in one of my books, which was that the secret to life is to have a task, something you bring to every minute of your day for the whole of your life. And the most important thing is it must be something you cannot possibly do. Find something impossible to do. That is, that will make you truly happy, trust me. But this isn't for everybody. I think with a lot of organizations, particularly the larger ones, don't even bother going there. Just go and buy other people that are more innovative than you are. Take an M&A approach, or just wander around the world looking for really good ideas and steal them. And really steal them. I mean, Procter & Gamble have a lovely phrase, seek and reapply. They mean stealing. Unilever talk about creative swiping. They mean stealing. There's nothing wrong with stealing, particularly if you improve what you've been stealing. And be prepared to get laughed at. That's another sort of thing that we should probably deal with. There's a lot of people out there, particularly consultants and government, with respect, that believe that everybody's creative. And when it comes to innovation, you just got to get the process in there and it's going to work. Well, up to a point that's true. You can make everyone more creative. You can help every business become more innovative. But actually, there is a sort of little touch of genius there that you can't really replicate. It's probably sort of generic or something. And if you have the wrong culture, I think you're wasting your time buying in process, because it's going to do sod all, frankly. You're going to have to change the culture, and you can't do that overnight. That will take you years and probably involves removal of quite a lot of people, and that will be painful. On the other hand, if you've got the right culture, you almost don't need the process, but obviously what you really want is a nice little balance between the two. You shouldn't be innovating in a vacuum. There's got to be a strategy for the innovation. It's got to link to the corporate mission and innovation and vision. Otherwise, it's just sort of floating in space, really. You've got to build in time, and ideally give people time to go and fiddle. I mean, the really great companies do this. Gore-Tex, 3M, Google, they all build in or allow people to go around and fiddle on companies' time, in the full knowledge that most of the things they do will be a waste of time. But a lot of the stuff they do will be fantastic. It'll be awesome, largely because it'll be their idea and they'll be completely committed to it. And you've got to keep experimenting over and over and over again. And also don't end up in your sort of ivory towers or silos. You've got to get out there and look at, walk a mile in your customer's shoes and find out what's really sort of tickling them. And customers are really useful. Don't forget about customers. Online innovation, open innovation, wisdom of crowds, prediction markets, all terribly, terribly useful stuff, particularly for refining ideas. Particularly for getting solutions to very tightly articulated ideas. But in my view, nothing really beats a walk on the beach, lunch with 4 good people and a bottle of wine. Ideas are inherently social. They need ideas, they need to bump into people and other ideas for them to work. The fourth idea is that, certainly in the early stages, quantity is quality. You need loads of ideas to get a good idea, and you shouldn't get too fussy about how rubbish some of them are in the very early stages. And people throw ideas out far too soon, and an idea that seems impractical one week might suddenly take on a different sort of relevance when something happens a few weeks later. Don't shut people down too soon, and try and capture all of the thinking, because a lot of this thinking is unstructured. It's sort of in people's heads and it wanders out the door in the evening. And when people leave the company, they take these rather wonderful things with them. And you need some way of actually capturing this, partly so you stop people replicating ideas that have already been thought of or already tried. Embrace the negative. I mean, there's a CEO of Cafe Nero that I heard speak, who runs reverse brainstorming sessions. The one rule of brainstorming is you're not allowed to be negative. Well, the one rule of his brainstorms is you're not allowed to be positive. Find out everything that customers hate about your business and products and use that as a springboard to improve them. And also, once you've got an idea that you think's got something going for it, then brainstorm around why it might go wrong and think of ways around that. Try and sort of work out ways to overcome those barriers. And then the other sort of classic thing is one thing, incidentally, customer service. Customer complaints are the best source of new ideas you'll ever find. What are people consistently complaining about? Because they're probably right. And I remember very well doing some work with ICI Dulux, and one of the rather strange complaints of customers of ICI Dulux, 90% of whom buy white paint, is that when you repaint a white wall, how do you know which bits you've missed? That was a complaint. And then some genius in a white coat thought, well, what if the paint started off with a pink tinge and dried white? You'd see which bits you'd missed. And that, I think, is now an existing product. And the other thing is, and this is a particularly inventor-type issue, is that people have an idea and they'll fall on their sword for it. Now, that's a very good idea if you're right, but you might be wrong. Inventors in particular are paranoid about people stealing their ideas. I mean, trust me, if the idea is good enough, you're going to have to ram the bloody thing down people's throat, okay? So don't worry about people stealing your ideas. You'll have more ideas, you know, so you really have to sort of relax about that a little bit. And I think the key thing is knowing when to continue and knowing when to kill it and move on. And, you know, I've never in my life killed something too fast, ever, but I have definitely held on to ideas for too long. And they've cost me money and I've missed opportunities as a result. So I think you have to know when to sort of hold and know when to fold, as they say. The fifth idea is really trying to get innovation throughout the entire organization. And bottom up is probably best, but unless you have top down as well, it's going to be difficult. You have to have a very senior sponsor, otherwise you are probably trying to push water uphill. And it really should come from the very top. I mean, Apple is the personification of that. It absolutely came from the very, very top. And it'll be interesting to see how Apple, I mean, I'd almost be on a sell on Apple right now because I'm concerned what's going to happen without Jobs. And we've slightly been here before with Morita at Sony after he died. Best ideas come from very odd places. Extreme users are very interesting. You know, really passionate tinkerers, hobbyists, nutcases. You know, if somebody's buying 10 cans of Marmite a week, every single week, they're a heavy extreme user. They might be interesting to go and have a chat with. And also customers, suppliers, the whole sort of stakeholder network, old ideas, stuff that's in the attic and all the rest of it. One word of warning, when you open things up very wide in terms of open innovation, I think you've got to be very careful at managing expectations, because if somebody gives you an idea that they think's a good one, they want you to react to them. And if you end up using that idea, you better be damn sure you reward them properly. I mean, otherwise you get into a different type of stealing. Create more accidents, rule number 6. There's a great book you should all read, which is ancient. I think it was published in 1962, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kahn. And he talks